Yes, I will call the meeting to order at 12 o'clock on the dot. Okay, Rosie, can you take roll call, please?
Yes, Director Gallagher,
Present.
Julie Peterson,
Present.
Max Ranjay,
Here.
Jessica Dixon, here, and Chair Pimentel. Absent today.
Okay, we will ask if there are any agenda modifications needed.
I don't believe so, but we'll note that Julie Peterson is our chair today.
There you go.
Make it official.
Are there any public comments on matters not on the agenda? Please stand.
No hands raised online.
Okay. All right. No public comment, so I think we will move on to, does the committee have any comments? Okay. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. Are there any public comments on the consent agenda? Just a minute.
Move approval.
Thank you. Gallagher and
Yes.
Ranjay. All right, Director Gallagher,
Yes.
Julie Peterson,
Yes.
Max Ranjay,
Yes.
Jessica Dixon.
Yes.
You.
Okay, so next we have the financial performance. So we will go ahead and do the finance. All right, different. All right, well, taking a look at the month of August, we had a strong month with $840,000 of EBITDA and a net income of $462,000. Do remember that this is the month where we corrected for the double booking of bad debt last month, and that was about a $975,000 correction. Everything else fairly strong. We'll get into the volumes of things. Fine. So on a year-to-date basis, we're favorable EBITDA of almost $1.7 million and a net loss of $1.35 million. We are doing better than budget, and also just as a reference point, at this time last year, we were losing 10.6, significantly better than last year. So here's rolling 13 months, just kind of a look at net revenue over expense, the bars being expense and the green line being net revenue. Just goes to show that prior to August, the green line going through the bars meant that the net revenue was less than expense. And so, you can just see that we still are volatile in the sense that some months we're able to make it and other months we don't. Luckily, in August, we're favorable with net revenue greater than our expenses. Okay, this is admissions. August admissions were strong after the last couple of months being fairly soft. We had 309 admissions for the month of August. So as you can see in this rolling 13 months, that was the most admissions. I'll give you a preview that September is not looking as strong from an admissions. Okay, next. So we've been talking about the fact that we have seen some decline in admissions because we've gotten better about identifying observations when that's appropriate. So this just goes to show you a consolidation of both admissions and observation count. You can, kind of infer from this that overall the number of patients served is slightly higher. We've kind of, 8 months into the year, pretty much evened out on what that mix is, where when earlier in the year we were comparing and we were saying we have so many fewer admissions and more observations. But now you can see we generally run, 90 to 100 observation cases month, and August was actually a little bit lower, it was just 81, and we did have more admissions. This is a little bit strange and something that my team's been kind of looking at because we actually have a lower case mix in the month of August, which would generally seem kind of off, you know, given that we had more admissions, but they were of a lower acuity. Deliveries, you know, they continue to be down from where they were, you know, this time last year, but we did recover a little bit. We had 62 in the month of August, so up from the last couple of months. Length of stay, kind of in line with the lower acuity, our length of stay was at 3.3 for the month. That was one of the lowest I've seen here, but it does align a bit with the acuity. We did have a little bit higher average daily census at 32 point. Showing that the acuity was 1.34, and generally we are in the 1.4 to 1.45 range. Sometimes getting up, you know, a couple times this year we've gotten up over 1.6. Outpatient visits, they were down a bit too. We only had averaged about 86 outpatient visits in the ER per day. That jumps up to about 93 when you consider the ER visits that became admissions. But we did pick up on our non-ER outpatient volume, and primarily in the imaging. Surgeries, they kind of played what they have been playing. We were down in the 40s, 46 for the month for inpatient, 127 on the outpatient. So generally about where we've seen the last 5 or 6 months. We were pretty good with robotics, 23 robotic cases. It is looking like September is a little light, so we'll be digging into that to understand what's driving that. Here's outpatient. You can kind of see the variation, and just calling out the ones that bring us the most volume. And you can see that it's pretty much the same 3 every month with the general surgeries, the OB/GYN, and the ortho surgeries. The GI ones are that kind of gold at the bottom, and so you know, we did have a pretty good month on that in August. From a payer mix perspective, strong commercial mix. We had 18.8%, so one of our highest months was the commercial mix, and we actually saw most of the decline in alliance at 38.2%. Remember, we've been as high as 44, almost 45%. So that is a lower amount for us. But the last couple months have been down on the alliance. The green is the Medicare managed Medicare, and so we are starting to see a little bit of growth there, and I think that'll be interesting as we go into open enrollment for the citizens, the senior citizens in the area, to see if that managed Medicare, I think there's more plans starting to pop up than historically have been down here. Next slide. On the outpatient side, pretty unremarkable, you know, kind of normal process. We had 23% commercial, 45% alliance, 19.5% Medicare. There's really not much change on the outpatient side. So generally that's it. We are just wrapping up, you know, the last bit of September, and then we'll be busily calculating our September EBITDAs and targets and seeing how the month ends. I think we should have a decent month. We did receive some incentive payments this morning from the Alliance for the quality initiatives that we're working on, and so that was very helpful.
Congratulations.
public comment on the financials? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the budget update. All right, so just kind of bringing you back here a little bit. So year to date, they were at almost a $1.7 million EBITDA. I just annualized that. That says kind of continue to operate at the level we've been operating. We should have about $2.5 million EBITDA for the year. And our current loss at 1.3 would annualize that to about a $2 million loss. And compare that to 23, where we lost $13 million. Pretty good progress for the year. 2025, we're targeting a $5 million EBITDA. A lot of work's going into this budget. It's not ready for prime time yet. It's amazing when you look at budget work. There's all these parts and pieces that are being worked on. We work on labor over here and, volumes and labor standards. We work on CDM increases and, looking at that at the various service levels. We look at expense per unit of service. It all seems like it should come together, and it does eventually. But I'm here to say today you're not going to be seeing a lot of numbers because it's still in its individual parts and pieces. Today I am going to talk you through some of the methodology. We've been doing a lot of work just really trying to solidify the drill down we do and the way we do drill down. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. A few notable items have come up there, and it'll just give you a sense of where we're headed. So starting with the gross revenue, this has been an interesting journey because this is the first year where we've really been able to dig into some details. We've got a great team that's, been pulling prior data, looking at contract rates. We're really trying to make sure that we make strategic price increases that make a difference on the net revenue side. Because just raising prices when you're not going to get paid anymore just lowers the percent collectible and makes you feel like, geez, we're not getting anything for all this work we do. So we evaluate the charge master increases on 4 criteria. What first kind of looked at is that we just looked at all the service departments and said, basically where's most of our gross charges come from. Would not surprise you, it's going to be emergency services, it's going to be room and bed rates, observation, labor and delivery, surgery. Those are basically kind of top areas. So, we are very careful at looking at those, and one of the things we really look at with those, because they're pretty shoppable services, is the comparative analysis to our competitors. Are our rates competitive? Are we kind of way out of the market? Too low, too high? So that is one place that we look. We also look, there's certain areas where you have level charges, such as the ED, and so one level is the lowest acuity, and as you raise the acuity, your charges should be a little bit higher, and so forth. Well, we found a couple of places where in the past CDM it was a little bit disjointed, so we're doing some cleanup there. And then, probably the most important thing is looking at our commercial contracts and being able to understand if we raise prices, we don't want to hit any lesser of language that triggers them to pay us less because we put too large of an increase in, and we also want to look at where the increases come in. How do we are we strategic in how we set our prices? This is very common across the industry. Everybody does this. So this is, the good news is this has really been the first year we've had the ability to do some level of this sort of analysis. We did find a couple of places where we were not competitive. We had a lot of volume, we didn't have a competitive price, and basically we had limits in our contracts that just said, we're still going to pay you what we're going to pay you, and so the rest of it just hit the defect line. We saw a big chunk of that in CT scans. So really what that says is we can reduce the price that we're charging for a CT scan without negatively impacting net revenue. It'll just help the overall percent collectible because we won't be just writing all that excess charge off, and we'll be more competitive within our market. We did do some increases. We have some kind of factored in. There's an increase almost everywhere. Most of them got 2.75. Some of them a little bit higher, 3.5%, 7.5%. But again, kind of able to compare against others. So, but the overall result is that we're actually doing a 2.3% decrease for all gross charges for this year. Next slide. So once we set the gross revenue, we've got the CDM, and as I was saying, that decrease will actually improve our collectible patient revenue because we won't just have so much excess gross charge that's being written off. We are still targeting to improve our net revenue through our revenue cycle improvements, as well as just, we do have commercial contracts that have some rate increases year over year. And so we're conservatively targeting that we should still see about a 0.5% increase to those charge-sensitive accounts. And I think before this budget's over, I always try to keep just, what do we expect the payers to pay us, and then what's the target that we're putting for ourselves in revenue cycle improvements to further collect more. And we work very closely with Guidehouse just in terms of timeliness of getting accounts out the door, following up on larger dollar accounts that for some reason are taking longer than 60 or 90 days to pay. The whole discharge not final billed, and how quickly we're getting physician documentation and everything that goes into being able to fill an account. So all that work will continue. There are some kind of unknowns at this point. The QAF 8 program, that's the QAF that we're currently in. This year we've had the benefit of kind of finishing off QAF 7 and doing QAF 8. QAF 7 will be done very shortly here. QAF 8 is a 2-year program, so currently we know that there's about $13 million worth of net receipts in QAF 8. What we don't know yet is QAF 9. We know it's a 1-year program, but it's not going to be approved until probably the middle of the year, the 2025 program. But, this year they got a late start on QAF 8. At this point we don't expect to know much about QAF 9 for a while. And while it is rumored to have some significant increases, it's a little bit hard to tell given the state of the budget, There are some cuts to DISH that are expected to take place. They've been postponed many times, but as of now, they're still saying they're going to take place. That would be pretty traumatic to us because that's a 50% cut, and that would be about $1 million hit for us. So I'm going to keep my fingers and toes crossed that it's postponed again. Someday maybe it'll just get wiped away, but not yet. From bad debt perspective, we continue. This is one of those areas that we just always continue to look at. How are we doing with self-pay collections, and even just making sure that we're not writing things off to bad debt unnecessarily. We do finally have a bad debt vendor in place that we did not have previously. So now, once they finish with the self-pay vendor, if they haven't collected, our bad debt vendor will take over and try to collect some dollars, and they should, collect some. It's not going to be a huge windfall, but it will help with a bad debt reduction. And then, there's not a whole lot we're expecting differently in other revenue. It's generally made up of the things you see here, and unless we have like some of the properties, the office space that we lease out, if any of those are coming to the end of their contract and we have any kind of market increase, that would be about, the one thing that we would really expect differently here. Other than grants, June's working on a lot of grants for the foundation, and as she is successful, she's been very successful so far in bringing those grants in, and then as we, seek reimbursement for things as it relates to those grants, that certainly will. So, changing directions, we'll talk about expenses for a little bit. On the expense side, there's a number of different ways that we look at things. We do look at expense per unit of service anytime things are volume driven. So, we can see how much it costs us, on a patient day basis or an ED visit basis. We have certain things that are contracted, professional fee agreements and certain other contracts. We know what we're going to pay based on those rates. Sometimes we just need to look at rolling 12 because there's some seasonality we want to consider. And, sometimes we just annualize something to say this is probably our best estimate of what this is, going to continue to look like. And that's usually where we look at a few years worth of history and say, hey, it's always $1.2 million. It's probably likely going to be $1.2 million or $1.3 million this year. We have the inflation factors. These are the ones that we have talked about previously. We continue to, watch and tweak if we need to tweak any of these, but basically looking at about 2.5% on the wages. The benefits pretty solid based on the broker change we've done, and we will budget inflation factors, and then we will also look at things that we do as initiatives to kind of offset inflation. That'll come up later. And then we are continuing to work on our productivity labor standards and our premium pay reductions to hopefully tighten up the salary and wage dollars. Next slide. I won't go through this line by line. This is something that my team and I worked on last week, just kind of going category by category to make sure we were all on the same page about which methodology generally we are employing in each account category. Sometimes we get a little bit finer because this year we are actually trying to go a level below just supplies and look at the individual supply accounts, because you might look at pharmaceuticals different than you're going to look at food supplies, things like that. But this is, generally the methodology that we're employing for the various account categories. Next slide. So some probable initiatives, and I expect this list to grow. We are looking to get our cath lab opened. I've done a range here on the cath lab, primarily because it depends on a number of things, certainly opening dates, certainly how fast it ramps up, but it very heavily on the payer mix. When I had originally done this, I kind of grabbed the ED payer mix, which is not as, it's not as strong as just the general outpatient payer mix. But as I've talked with Phyllis and Matco and Steve, and we've talked about where that first set of patients is going to come from, yes, there will be some that likely might start in our ED, but since we're not really set up to do everything yet, we're not a STEMI receiving center, this is more likely going to be elective cases. So we are probably going to get the benefit of a little stronger payer mix. And when I popped that payer mix into the pro forma, the numbers got a little bit better first year. This is also, the volume that we're projecting is, we tried to be conservative in the first year to give it time to ramp up. So it's really about 60% of the volume we're truly expecting. We're still have on the table maybe some new pediatric volume. We really haven't priced that out yet. Every year, I generally say labor labor productivity and premium pay, I'm gonna be going for $500,000 to $1 million improvement. This includes, you know, our use of contract labor as well as our own staff. So, you know, that's still in the mix. The supply expenses, you know, we have struggled with higher supply costs as we've been working on getting our GPO Vizient system up and running and able to look at data and validate data. And some early signs have suggested, you know, that there could be, you know, $500,000 worth of opportunity. We know that some of that we won't materialize. It may be preference items that may just take longer than a year to go through it. But we also know we're still at the early stages of actually getting all the data. And so that first opportunity listing may have been even light from what it truly could be. So analysis still in progress, but, you know, my gut tells me we'll be looking somewhere in the $300,000 to $500,000 range there. Purchasing the property, you know, we've talked about that when we purchase the property, we'll eliminate the rent payment to MPP. We've got a new primary care physician starting in the clinic. While the overall pro forma, you know, is that it will cost us more than we will generally generate in revenue, what we really don't have a good handle on is what's the referral business really going to be, what's, you know, kind of the add-on ancillary revenue that is going to flow into the hospital by having a primary care doc here, Coastal Health Partners. And then I've got the LED light replacement savings. That's a project that we're going to undertake that's about $90,000 worth of savings. And I think, you know, more things like this are going to kind of come out as we do work on this budget. So, like I said, I don't really have any numbers for you at this point. At this point, I'm going to estimate that we're probably somewhere between $3 and $7 million away from our target. So, we have a lot of work still to do, but at that point, I'll take any questions.
My main question is about the new primary care doc. We know his referral pattern. I mean, a lot going elsewhere. Or we expect all his lab work to be.
He sent most of his lab work to Quest.
Yes.
You have other data from.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So the referral patterns will change and more volume will be
In our favor. And I assume he had fully able financially profitable practice in recent years.
just a good patient base.
Okay.
And there was a lot of items that were done in office that will now be referred to the hospital. There was
Stress tests and such.
Yes.
Okay, is there any public comment on the budget update? All right. No?
Sorry, I had one other question. I don't know if it's appropriate for Finance Committee. In terms of the ongoing evolution of the cath lab, I know we're starting as a diagnostic lab. We had a sort of rough time frame for when it might become a therapeutic cath lab. I'm thinking really about peripheral angioplasty as well, or even if it's
We already have our licensing for diagnostic, but we won't be starting until we have the international.
The time that we start will be interventional.
oh, fabulous.
Yeah, we just won't have the receipt.
Are the hurdles now then to get to be a therapeutic, or you're over most of them as a diagnostic?
The application's pretty
My understanding over the years that Dr. Joy did an awful lot of peripheral angioplasty.
All right. Well, if there are no other comments, then we can adjourn the meeting.